obscure world of parking. We use it every day, but have we really capitalized on the intricacies of our industry? In this podcast, the Parking Network will go behind the scenes and talk to industry professionals about all things parking, from the horizon of evolving technology and even stories of the old days. We hope to encourage and inspire operators and property managers alike to look at parking through a new lens. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Our Parking Industry Podcast. I am here with Clyde Wilson and Trina Tutor. I'm Krista Olien, and today we're going to be talking about safety and security in parking garages. Hollywood has given us in the industry a bad rap for our facilities, and so we want to go through some of the things that facilities can do to help improve the perception of safety and security while also improving the actual safety and security. On a previous episode, whenever we talked to Frank Delmonico, he mentioned managing perception. So you're going to hear us talk about that a lot throughout this episode. So Trina, I think you have a question for Clyde, if you want to jump in.
Sure. A lot of times whenever we start talking about a subject or it's the first time we talk about it, we like to talk about the history. So Clyde, can you tell us a little bit about the history of safety and security in the parking industry?
Sure. As everybody knows, I've been in the parking business a long time. So I go back to really a different age of safety and security and how parking was viewed and how safety and security was viewed. When I came into the parking business in 1979, the parking industry's position was really, especially in parking garages, safety and security was not our responsibility. It was the building's responsibility. We wanted a hands-off approach to it, totally hands-off, because we didn't want to get drug into the lawsuits that were potentially out there if something happened. And as in the very early days, cameras were expensive, so we weren't in the business of putting cameras all over garages. Safety and security was, but they were expensive again. So what happened was safety and security, because cameras were expensive and we're trying to increase the perception of security in garages, we're putting in fake cameras. So we had garages that had fake cameras all over the place. They were the shell of a camera, but they weren't turned on and there was no camera inside the can, which for some reason somebody thought that was a good idea. But how long did you think it took for those lawsuits to start when a young lady is attacked in a garage and she says, well, they were watching me. I knew they were coming. And I remember this lawsuit. The young lady said, I saw the camera. I knew they were coming. So I didn't get myself into danger by fighting back because I knew they were coming. Mm-hmm. It was an empty camera. Nobody saw her. Mm-hmm. And it didn't go well. So, we had that really pushed us to distance ourselves from this. We wanted our name that we had nothing to do with security. But times have changed and things have evolved a lot. Over the years, the security people in the buildings learned we can't put up fake cameras. If we're going to put up security, then we have to be serious about it. So security and the perception of safety has evolved a lot over the last 40 years to where we are at least in a little bit better position today. However, it appears, at least I think you guys will probably have something to say about this, but it appears that the possibility of not being safe in a parking garage has changed a little bit and become more difficult.
Yeah, I think one of the things that brings to mind is how the line between the responsibilities of the building for security purposes and the operators of the parking itself, how that line is kind of blurred. It's a very gray line for the average parker. So if I'm an average parker and I see that there's someone present in the building, they may be or in the garage, they may just be the parking operator. So are they responsible for things to happen? Of course, just a human being will help if something happens, but who ultimately is responsible if something does go awry in a garage?
I think times have evolved to put us in the position that and I'm going to tell you, I still don't see it today. We do not do a good job of working together with security in the buildings. But the reality today is everybody's involved in the security in the garage. We're in it. We have people in it. We're responsible for things that security's not, which is the perception. Well, just like Frank said, if you have a dirty garage that's not very well lit, you can certainly attract a bad element and certainly raise that risk of having people think this is a good place to come and cause a problem because it's dark and I can hide. And so I think it's always been a joint responsibility. I think we, in the early days of parking, tried to stay out of that responsibility, but I don't think today we can do that with social media, with the communications ability, with the technology that we have today. We do carry some joint responsibility in this. We just need to realize that the security in the building and us in parking are both responsible for the safety of the garage, and we are not doing a good job of that, but it's certainly something we can do a good job of.
I was recently in a parking garage. It was relatively new, but some of these things that used to not be so prominent, I think are really growing in prominence for that reason, like a roll-up door that didn't used to exist. As in every facility, it still doesn't, but a roll-up door that's the intention is let cars in, not people. So
Right.
with that, and then also the facility I was in recently had lighting that was motion sensor. So whenever you would walk, the next set of lights would turn on. And as you would drive, the next set of lights would turn on. So that does two things. That makes the facility well lit, which we're going to talk about lighting in just a minute. But it gives you a sense that, oh, no one or no thing has moved over there because the lights aren't on. So that again is a perception that helps with that idea. So touching on lighting, Clyde, what are some best practices for lighting in a facility?
Well, lighting has always been an interesting subject. I think we always designed, if you look at the numbers and you look at, Lee came up with the numbers last night and sent the most recent set of foot candle requirements to all of us, and those really haven't changed since I came into the parking business. And if you look at the foot candle requirements, I always thought, even when I was fairly young in this business, that those were designed for cars and not people. They're designed for when you're in a car driving to be sure you can see well enough to navigate the garage, but they were never designed well enough to light up the tremendous barricade that a car represents, which allows somebody to hide behind it. And feel like they can be back there. So I never thought the lighting requirements were good. The lighting requirements were basic. They were good for driving. They gave you enough light in the driving lanes and in the parking lanes to be able to maneuver your car and see, but I never thought the lighting requirements of the past were good enough to be able to really have a tremendous impact on security. If you want to keep people out of the garage and keep it where the customers can see a potential threat, then I think we need to relook at what we're doing in terms of lighting. And what you saw with the motion sensors really helps because it kind of balances the waste of electricity by having lights on in this big garage all the time, with the ability to really light up the area where the customer's walking to give everybody a much better chance to see what's going on around them.
And we've seen some facilities that take it upon themselves to not just meet the requirements for the foot candle lighting recommendations, but they take it upon themselves to increase the lighting on their own to what they think is a manageable and appropriate level. So that differentiates, one garage across the street from another. Again, the parker's perception is, I would rather park over here where maybe it's a little more expensive because maybe I feel safer in that facility. Whereas the parking garage across the street, I might save $1 or $2, but I don't feel safe there. So that's an interesting piece to that and the parker perception. One other thing we talked about recently just amongst ourselves was the interesting requirements at the entrance and the exit for lighting, something I actually never really knew or paid attention to. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Right. That's been around since I came into the parking business. It was one of the early things I learned about lighting. And when you're driving in from the outside, your eyes are adjusted for the sunlight. So your pupils are much smaller. And then you turn into a parking garage and the light begins to immediately go away and you're looking into a dark garage. If you've got 2-foot candles of light in front of you, you don't have much compared to the foot candles of the sunlight just on the outside. So people have a tremendous amount of problem adjusting their eyes quickly enough as you're driving up to a ticket spitter and trying not to hit it. Um, so the lighting was always adjusted to very bright in the beginning of the entrance as you came into the garage and you came up to the ticket spitter. And then if you did it correctly, you graduated it down as you moved into the garage until your eyes had the chance as you were driving to adjust to the lower level, to the 1 and 2 foot candles that are more present in a parking garage. So lighting has always been, and I still look for it and I see it in some places and I don't in others where that's been done, but it was always very helpful. I remember as a young person coming into this business, when I learned that, I started paying attention to it, and I started paying attention to the impact of it. And you could really tell the difference when lighting was done at the entry and the exit properly, because you have the same thing in reverse. When you're coming out of a dark garage, you're coming toward a sunlight. So when you get to the exit and the gate goes up, you're about to drive from 2-foot candles into the sunlight. So that graduated that's used to come in does the same thing going out. It lets you gradually, let your pupils gradually decrease in size to let in less of the sunlight so that you're not, because we're also, and I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a really high percentage of parking garages with exits that come onto a sidewalk that also have a restricted view to your right. And it's hard to see people. So adjusting your eyes, something that seems like a small thing, getting your eyes adjusted and using that lighting differential really has a big impact on the safety of driving into the entry and through the exit.
Speaking of the exiting where you can't see pedestrians, can you talk a little bit about the other safety features that some parking garages, especially in busy downtown areas, use?
Yeah, that wonderful buzzer or horn that goes off when a car gets to the, or when a pedestrian's going by, or when a car gets to the exit. Yeah, that's been around too since the beginning of time that I can remember. Some cities used it more prevalently than others. And it's also more important in garages. If you have a lot of garages that the wall to the right separating the garage from the sidewalk is so close to the exit lane that a driver of a car just can't see two steps beyond that line. So it lets the lets the pedestrian know there's a car coming. So when you go moseying out into the exit lane, you might want to slow down and look to your left before you step out there, and a 4,000-pound car is coming at you. So those have been around for a long time, and I've never liked them, but I always thought they were terribly, terribly important to help with the safety of cars leaving garages, especially those that had difficult lines of sight.
So in a previous episode where we were talking with Bob Harkins, he talks about the security on a college campus in a parking facility, and he really dives into some things that he saw in his past experience. So what different aspects should a parking operator or parking manager consider whenever they're looking at the type of facility that they're running? So if we're looking at a commercial office building downtown versus a hospital maybe in a suburb or a university, are there different things that should be considered, or should all things be considered no matter the clientele that's being served?
Well, I'll give you another example from my very, very, very early days in the parking business. I had a large parking garage with plenty of space, and there was an event that night in the building that parking garage was associated with. So, and I had a surface lot right next to the garage, but the garage was 4 times the size of what the traffic that was going to come to this event. So I really didn't worry about it. I knew we had the space to handle it and was prepared for it and had set my event rates to handle the traffic coming into the garage. And I didn't pay attention to the surface lot. Um, Women don't mind the extra walk. They would much rather park in the openness of a surface lot than to pull into a garage if they're alone. So I learned very quickly that um, that your customer traffic does matter in how you deal with safety and security, because the young ladies filled up my surface lot and I didn't have the rate set for the surface lot. And the garage was about nothing. So it was a good lesson to learn, but it's very true. And that lesson still holds true today, that with the different types of populations that we have on a college campus, we have a very, very large number of young ladies out walking around. And, traditionally during the daytime, there's a lot of people around, but there are night classes. And so and when you're managing parking on a university campus, you really have to look at this a little differently and be sure that you understand who your service is to, which is a large number of young ladies on college campuses, and to be sure that they're safe, especially in the areas where the night classes are. So, it's something that you have to look at this through parking, to who your customers are, what times of traffic. It's a lot of difference between managing a daytime garage that has nothing at night and a garage that may have sporadic or a lot of traffic at night. We've had, I tell the story now, when we were doing focus point, where we had a full service command center. So our command center wasn't just raising the gate, answering the call and raising the gate. We were a full service command center. And as a full service command center, we were there to help. And we began to see, doing this, a growing trend of women who were working in the building at night and were working late would call the command center and say, "Will you walk to my car with me?" And we took that very personal, that it was very, very, very important for us to be able to handle that call, not to push it off to security, but when they called and asked us, we were there. So we would stay on the phone with them as they left their office, go down the elevator with them as long as their phone worked in the elevator. And if not, they'd call us back and walk to the garage with them and stay with them until they were on the street. And of course, that was a more current time when safety and security, I think, has changed a lot. So we have a different group of people in the streets now than we did in my early days in the parking business. We had homeless people on the streets, but they were more entertaining than they were a threat.
Times in the downtowns have changed.
Changed a lot. That's exactly right. They've changed a lot.
So again, another thing and another way parking has to evolve, right, is to address those perceived threats. So how can a facility address the perceived threats through security measures? What are best practices for that?
Well, the most important thing you said are the times are changing, and we in the parking business went through a lot of years where we didn't really see times change and we didn't pay attention to it. Today, as a parking manager, it's terribly important that we pay attention to the way things are changing now, and to take very active steps. When I first came into this business, we didn't really see safety and security as something that I spent a lot of time on. Today, it's becoming one of the most important things that we spend a lot of time on. And the part of the other reason is, today we're pulling, I feel very responsible for this, because a focus point was designed to take people out of the garages. So we've reduced the staffing in garages so much that there are very, very few parking people in the garages, which means we've upped the potential for a problem. So, which means to us as the managers of the garages, it's up to our responsibility to look out for all the things that we can do for safety and security, which is to make 100% sure that the garage looks clean. If it looks clean, it means to a criminal, there are people here keeping it clean. The trash cans are empty. There's no Coke cans laying around or paper cups laying around. There's nothing spilled on the floor that hasn't been cleaned up. All of those things represent, to the person who may become a problem, it represents that there are people here all the time keeping this place clean. And then lighting, there are several really good lighting companies that have now really made the parking business a home, because the lighting technology has changed so much. We started seeing it changing 20 years ago. Today, it's totally different than what it was before. So we have the ability, by having good lighting consultants, to really relook at our ability to light a garage and to light the pedestrian movement ways. Then we also have the cameras. The camera price has come down so much that we can put cameras literally everywhere. But at the same time, you have to be able to watch them. But we also have analytics in cameras that are really starting to change, where cameras can really tell the difference between somebody who's walking to a car and somebody who's watering in a garage, and alert security. So we have a lot of different things in technology now that are making something that I thought was a very difficult job in the early days in parking, something that we need to do better, and we're having the ability to do it much better now. We can't ignore some of the new things that are coming in to parking that really give us the ability to do a better job. And if we do a good job with security, it's just like you mentioned earlier, people want to park with us because they know they feel safe there.
They feel safe, and we hope they actually are safe.
And they are safe.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's the perception and the reality, and we want to be sure we're managing both.
Both, right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good.
So one of the last things I have is, what role does convenience, like convenient access to the garage, how quick the system is to get in and out, what role does that play in a parker's perception of that safety and security?
Well, I think it's just, I've always thought this. If the system works well, customers feel better about it. And when they feel better about it, they feel better about everything. If you upset a customer because your equipment is slow getting them in, and traffic are behind them, and somebody's blowing their horn at them, and if the LPR system doesn't work really well, or there are other issues at the entrance, you just start off with a bad perception.
Yep.
And let me tell you, it probably doesn't get a lot better after the gate goes up and they move into the garage. So that's a great question, because it actually starts on the street from the time you make the decision to pull into a garage as you come through. But I don't think we spend a lot of time realizing how important the functionality and the maintenance and lighting and traffic movement is around the entry and exit, and how much that also impacts the perception of security.
Yeah, if I'm thinking about my first impression pulling into a parking facility, I am rolling down my window, focusing on something else besides my surroundings. So that's kind of an interesting position to put someone in as their first impression pulling into a garage. So the efficiency and that kind of, the quickness of the equipment and the ease of use are all important to that. So it's kind of an abstract concept that ties into exactly what we're talking about today. So Trina, do you have any other questions for Clyde, or have we covered most of the safety and security topics we were hoping to?
Yeah, the only thing that I thought of is earlier, Clyde, you were talking about how with Focus Point, y'all had that command center and you provided the service of, if a woman was leaving the office late, they knew they could call y'all and you would stay on the phone with them. So as operators are pulling people out of the garages, one, have you seen any company that is providing that service? And two, how do you think they can maybe not advertise that they do that, but like, how do you think they can do that better, or show the people that come into their garage that they're providing that?
Well, there's really two parts to that answer. One is the parking company that's managing the command center has to know that they want to do that. It's something they want to do. So if they want to do it, they will make it very accessible. And there are certainly ways to provide that level of information to the customers. We have everybody's email address today. Social media allows us the ability to do that. And the most important thing is, I don't think people realize, or parking people do, I think, how much people within a building communicate with each other. I certainly learned that lesson the hard way back 42 years ago. When you neglect something, they all know it. Back many years ago, I had surface lots that were paid by a coin box. And so people pay by coin box. And then I had a coin box checker that came back and checked to see if everybody checked the car and checked the box that was paid to be sure that everybody paid. And the one box that didn't have any money in it, they wrote a ticket to that car, right? Well, the guy that was my best coin box checker got very ill, and I didn't really have anybody trained to do that. So what we did for a while was we just went out and got the money out, and we didn't write tickets for about 6 or 7 days until I realized my revenue's going down because these people are all talking to each other, and they figured out he's not writing tickets.
Everybody knew.
So a whole bunch of people, and these people didn't all work in the same building. They were parking on a surface lot. So a whole bunch of people realized very quickly, he's not writing tickets. So all of a sudden my revenue goes down because people stop paying. And I started to, before Bill came back to work, we had to get somebody out there writing tickets. And then the word got around really quickly.
Fast, yeah.
Word travels downtown. Word travels amazing.
And that can go both ways. That can be good news and bad news.
And
so
bad
if someone,
news, right.
If there's an operator, again, to set your facility apart, if your operator is providing unique services like that, it's something that'll make you and your facility different than the one next door or the one down the street. So
Yeah,
something to consider that's very simple.
Very, very simple. It is a little time consuming. It is a little time consuming because once you start that, the number of people wanting that service goes up pretty rapidly. But I think that providing that impression, that higher level impression of safety and security, especially at night, is just something that we have to do. We have, and the parking operators and the building owners, because it does cost more. Everybody has to decide this is a service they want to provide. But when you have that command center, you certainly have the ability to do it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And I think that would make operators stand out too. If most aren't providing this service, it'll help them stand out if they do.
It does. Especially with this trend. I mean, we have two trends going on here. We all know, or we hear that since COVID, since a kind of a change in attitudes and a change in life, we have an increase in at least the perceived feeling of security and threats. And we're also going into a period where what we started in 2007 of pulling people out of the garages is now only accelerating at an even faster pace today. With e-commerce, it's a tremendous change in how parking is managed. And we're going to see a continued move on the reduction of people standing in the garage, which increases the perception of safety and security for the customers. So we're going to have to counter that. And to counter that, we're going to have to look for ways like the ability to walk people to their car. We have the cameras in the darn garages today. There's a lot of cameras being used for space counting, space management. There's tons of ability to communicate through cameras, through garages, and cell phones that can stay with you to walk through a car. So we've really got to relook at how we're managing safety and security, because we have the technology to do it today. And the price of that technology has come down where it's very affordable and certainly capable of doing it.
Absolutely. So just like everything that we've talked about in our parking industry, it's an evolution and we are in the middle of it. So with
For sure.
So with the improvement of technology, I think just like Clyde said, we can turn around and look at things from a different point of view. Like maybe it's a two-factor piece. Maybe there's physically someone there. Maybe there's someone that can be on the phone with someone walking to the car, or maybe it's the combination of someone physically there and a camera system. The combination of things can never be too much, I don't think, for the average parker to feel safe and secure in a parking garage. So when I opened this, I was talking about the bad rap that Hollywood has given us. So we want to change that.
Right.
And the best way we can do that is by the perception of the first time and the long time parker in our parking facilities. So thanks for listening today, and we hope you enjoyed this conversation about safety and security on the Our Parking Industry podcast. Have a good day. To quote one of the greatest business minds of our time, Charles Munger, he said, "The best thing a human can do is help another human being know more." Here on Our Parking Industry podcast, we want to provide knowledge and resources. If you heard something that sparked your curiosity in today's episode, please reach out on our socials at TPN Consulting. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe and follow. See you next time on Our Parking Industry.